A brave man stands atop the towering wall where life and death have gathered, looking down upon the many souls who have long ago fallen below the sky's edge. He leaned in closely to ask Louis what had happened when they battled for so long together. Louis reminded him of the beginning of the calamity. Strange rifts swallowed the world and stitched together a chaotic mess of monsters. As time passed, these cracks turned into deadly pits where people who reached them got spells they couldn't control. That's why a special center of magic built itself around them to fight for victory and take down every boss. Lou watched the hero with intense focus, knowing he would need to vanish completely because this was exactly how he ended up dying. He was suddenly so mad that his mind couldn't stop him from crashing through the walls of power. The men in this elite group could rip apart the Empire's safety just by pressing one button, and he stood there, the strongest threat any soldier ever faced. So the crown belonged to royalty itself, because that was how the Empire stayed safe and sound. With eyes blazing hot from rage, the protagonist stared down, asking himself, "Is that a way to kill my family and my friends?" Louis stared hard into his own face because he knew he was not going to stay still when the Empire fell. Louis paused for one last moment, then unleashed an explosive charge that shattered everything in his way and showed him that he'd always been cheating on his armor before. The explosion would also inject a deadly compound right into his wounds. Even though Li Kuei remembered he'd lost a fight with such high power, he didn't care because his mighty army was ready to defend him every moment. It was right as he slipped away from life's final stretch that he started remembering the happy days when his friend lived like a dream, and he kept talking about them all along the way. When he finally reached a quiet spot to rest, Mirror World, the world's most powerful hidden power, glowed brightly and turned into reality, shattering everything around him back to its original form. He had lost his life, and his soul sank down into the deep, dark lake. Decades ago, two boys chained up a boy in a tree and then put his whole body into the water. They hit him in the belly while he was still trying to catch himself, and then told his buddy to do a backflip over the edge. They were laughing so hard that they thought his face would be the best lesson ever. The boy felt like he was going to drop his lungs before he finished speaking. Sometimes being the only one who feels bad about life felt like a job that required his whole attention. That sudden flash of light in his chest made him feel awake for the first time. A shy boy with thick glasses stepped forward to warn his friends of an impending death before they could move. He stood in class, eyes darting between the teacher and the bullies, whispering, "If I were dying right now, I'd just pop up from my knees instead of crying." Then he pointed out that the kid with glasses was actually too smart to be an honest hypocrite because he led everyone else to finding him. The boy who was crying over his glasses felt so terrified when he realized his dad had killed him. He immediately told his friend that it was all just a prank made by them to force him into it. The bullies were furious because they prepared to smash that boy. Then a sudden flash of bright blue light tore through the water as if a giant lantern was being lit up for the first time. The thugs ran out, screaming that the scary dungeon wasn't big enough for them anymore. He stared at the boy in the glasses as he tried to stop him from being tortured. He spotted the man hanging upside down and began sprinting toward the rope, fully aware that saving someone who could drown would be a risky gamble. And then that big, dark water vanished under the sun, letting terrifying creatures out of their hiding spots. The little boy with his spectacles began carefully untying his strings. As if his mind couldn't hold the tension, a monster slammed down and crushed him hard. And suddenly, a boy who had been tattered came running to grab him, pulling him straight from where the attackers were chasing. Then the man pulled out a long, icy finger and threw it at him with a mighty punch that turned the ice into glass. He told the system he'd healed a little demon for free, but it said the mission couldn't be finished because its health bar was already full. The boy with glasses panicked because he couldn't figure out why he was saving a dying monster. When a monster tried to attack again, he pulled up a magical shield, stopping the blow before it could hit him. The hero walked through a dark room and found his name engraved on the screen, Yun, and suddenly, a blue beam shot out of the door to grant him his channel status. And suddenly, he felt like he'd been caught in a trap, because if anyone did touch him normally, it wouldn't have made sense at all. After a long wait, they grew and became much stronger inside the dungeon. But each new skill came with special rules based on which class they belonged to. He was once a fierce warrior who finally climbed to the top of the mountain. He once learned to use his own mind as a magic mirror that flipped reality for him. He got sucked into a hollow mirror world and waited for his own voice to end before finally hearing the dying scream of another child inside it. He finally understood that the boy was alive and well because he got back to his own body after so many years. It wasn't quite what she expected. Even though her heart didn't feel entirely peaceful, she still managed to say thank you to the boy for letting him get some back. A young man wearing glasses stood in front of Yun and said urgently, "I'm so scared. The monsters are right outside, and I can't do any more than one." He wasn't a fighter at all. His body was already breaking down when the guys started charging in. He tried to sprint, but the sheer force of their attack knocked him back so hard that he hit the ground before he could dodge anymore. He opened a skill window, and suddenly everyone felt pointless. A simple heal fixed one's health to 4 points by turning a monster into harmless vines that trapped only a little guy in place. Chanter tried very hard to be helpful, but nobody could really tell him how to do any of the other jobs he needed to help with. No wonder that entire class felt so inferior. For a moment, with those stubborn old fighting habits on point, it was only a matter of time before they broke away and got back together. Yuna jumped away from the monster before it could hit him, because dying instantly was too risky for him. He found a perfect spot in the sky where the mirroring of the world held only one last chance to save him. The hero tried to dodge an attack while trying to touch something scary, but because he wasn't sure if his magic level was right or if he needed just the perfect reflection, the spell completely failed before he could do anything else. He tried again and hit the monster even harder. This time the explosion went wrong because he was still too weak for that beast. He noticed the problem and realized the mirror wasn't working. He now turned his attention to something new. The monster's weapon was too weak for him, so the fight ended in a defeat after all the damage he had taken from its power. He laughed while trying to wear his favorite outfit on a tattered linen shirt, but he still couldn't make it work because the fabric was already broken and useless as a garment. A boy full of excitement burst into the room after hearing a warning, scrambling back onto his knees to apologize for wasting time while trying desperately to keep up with his useless skills. A blinding blast of power shot down, and suddenly, a towering entity named the malformed Overlord, who had yet to be leveled up, materialized before you. A young man with thick-rimmed glasses stared as he realized the dark beast before him was far too dangerous, needing a powerful weapon just to pull himself out of it. The sky shattered into a million jagged shards as a sudden, crushing explosion erupted beneath him, turning his vision into total darkness until he plummeted straight down to the earth. Thousands of fierce monsters stepped out into the dark like a storm of doom just as the darkness began. The protagonist was straining under a barrage of attacks while running away, yet the monsters kept charging toward him, causing him to realize that his own skills were too weak to stop them from reaching him at all. The hero finally threw his magic at Zhao's quick-witted shield, only for the world to say he missed, because nobody else can undo a trick like that. As he saw others stop their tricks, he smiled because now he could undo all the trouble he had created. Once the hero finally unlocked his power, he found that Mirror World had already fixed the vines wrapping around him. A swarm of violent thorns burst across the dirt floor, knocking over everything around them in a wild explosion. A fierce beast launched its claws at the hero as a ring of crimson light wrapped around it, narrowly deflecting the threat before letting the main character pass through. He looked puzzled because he didn't know exactly what was going on. The hero finally understood that his magic wasn't turning things into walls. Instead, he was shattering them all with sudden, jarring shocks of confusion. Normally, the vines wouldn't just tie up one foe. They'd pull them all in at once, leaving him helpless and stuck for real. But wait, this time the chaos has turned into sharp thorns that suddenly shoot straight toward a goal, and it's not much luck for any of them. The monsters started fighting over each other because the confusion spell made every hit go to a random person instead of their own team. He didn't know how to stop smiling at all, because now a useless trick was turning into magic, making him think about what could happen when everyone else tried to undo their other tricks too. The Mirror World really did live up to its reputation for being a highly skilled secret ability. It didn't just reverse the usual effects. It also gave everyone a big boost on top of all things. Imagine he tried to use that impossible trick. It wouldn't work well and wouldn't hold any longer than a single heartbeat. He swung a steel blade into the dirt, knowing exactly how to reverse whatever skill left behind him when he stopped moving again. The powerful skill that boosted his attacks by 5% was finally active. It cost him 20 mana for 3 seconds, so he could cast it on one enemy without wasting precious energy. Yin flipped back his hand when he decided to use the trick blade, spending 40 mana points over 6 seconds that gave him a 10% chance to win every single time he tried again. The mysterious blade burst from his hand, flooding the room with an electric glow as every move he made gave him a 10% extra punch. He knew that every single skill used would give him a nice boost to his power, and he was certain this trick blade wouldn't be active until just 6 seconds left on its timer. Just by turning on that switch, using your skills meant the magic sparkled brighter. Yuna finally reached the 6th floor of her life. He watched as countless monsters died in a messy fight among themselves, then found out those dead ones actually handed them good XP to keep going on. The boy acted instantly when the monster launched its surprise attack to stop it. Yin stared at the glowing HP bar, seeing how much less mana he needed before leveling up completely. The chaos in the dark didn't stop him. Instead, he sharpened that one strange blade and stepped into battle with purpose. Yin suddenly threw out a cloud of fire to drain mana, and that single move sent his sword up, a boost he'd earned every time he drank from it. So now he's down to just 12 points left, but his weapon is already giving him an extra 120% damage per hit. He blinked as the light caught in his pupils before he saw the monster sprinting down the path. This new trick let him smash his weapon with a single flick of the wrist, reaching 2.5 times as strong as anyone else could do it. When the monster attacked, our boy flew aside and wrapped around the creature to cover up for him, leaving only a sharp wound on its back before he turned his back on the beast. Xiaoi had been completely stunned and couldn't believe that a level 5 chanting mage was even looking at him like that. Yet he wondered how it all happened since then, as he kept on fighting down the monsters one after another with no chance of stopping them. With a mighty 6 level hit stat and 1 mana regen per second, he imagined reaching over twice as powerful than any other fighter in the world. In a split second, he crushed a tough 11 level monster and couldn't help smiling at all. He finally understood that his current strength was simply not enough to defeat those elite leaders level 11. That was the first time I saw a hand emerge from the earth. Yin focused intently as a terrifying level 21 beast named Battle Fiend Chimera broke free from the earth, its mighty roar echoing through the void. He swung his fist across the arena and slaughtered those tiny creatures right here in one big leap. Chaoji's eyes were full of terror while he saw his friend suddenly startled by an unimaginable new threat in the dungeon. The boss charged at the boy with those jagged, angry thorns, but the skill shot through him because the monster wasn't afraid of them all. Chaoji raised his hand as if summoning a shield to block the incoming monster's attacks right before they even got close. It was a strange mix of surprise and shock as Yuna looked down at the man she had known all along, who suddenly appeared beside her without hesitation. The blonde boy named himself a fool because his friend kept asking him not to go ahead. The boss roared at him, smashing his hand into the air while he tried to block a blow that would have broken the entire kingdom. She sprinted forward as he reached out for her, letting her dive into the cool air while he activated his powers. A quick heal on Xiao restored his health to 54 points, but the cost was high. 5 mana points were needed before he gained a dangerous 10% damage boost. Right after Xiao Jiai's healing spell casted again, he was instantly knocked back by a massive explosion of damage that healed him for just 5 points. The boy's mana points finally topped out, making him think his own healing skills were so weak that Xiaoi needed a health potion. He immediately handed over the emergency supply while we explained why he wanted to drink it first. Then, as soon as the time expired on his trick blade, he said, "I have 85 seconds left." Yin had spotted something terrifying on the ground and immediately began running to hide behind his back, knowing that the boss wasn't going anywhere while his team members were already gone. He showed off his sword and asked Xiaoju to wait a moment before tackling the beasts, causing the guy to look surprised. "Oh no, my boy." He moved like a thunderclap and sliced the monsters to pieces, but wait. His trick blade hit the ground right before he could use it again. That means his duration has reached 0, and Yuna just leveled up, restoring him to 8,020 HP. The rogue mage watched as he tapped his chaotic thorns repeatedly, each swipe draining a single mana point and instantly spiking his attack by 10% until the boss finally gave up on him before leveling up again. He stared at the clock and suddenly felt his heart race, realizing that casting chaotic thorns 400 times would take him from 0 to 10 levels in less than a minute. Tiaoji had a heart beating like a drum, but he couldn't shake the terrifying realization that his vision had been turned upside down. Yin jumped over many levels of the game and kept getting higher every time he tried. The boss stepped up for a big fight, but his little friend started glowing before he even knew what was coming. Now, he stood up and looked down at the map as a bright new star appeared in his eye. His sharp new sword burst with power because the 510% boost lasted for 9 minutes, longer than he needed to survive today's fight. Yuna charged forward like an unstoppable storm, severing her own arm in one swift motion before vanishing into the shadows to strike with terrifying speed. Just as it took a moment for the boy to realize he could cut his own flesh into tiny shards, they were already running toward the wall. In a split second, his hero shrank to a tiny speck and took down a level 21 boss that was almost as tough as him. Our little boy just finished his battle with that boss and climbed up to the top of the tower, standing at a dizzying height of 15 years old. Chaoji gasped in disbelief as he realized his mind felt like a blank page before the first spell. He wondered desperately if that level 5 chanter, who had previously taken on such massive adventures alone, had finally made it to finish this completely fresh dungeon for the last time. So the scary monster that once ruled the dungeon fell away, and the whole place got clean. He walked closer and whispered, "Yes, I'm really you." A boy watched as monsters dropped items while the system told him to collect them. Yet his eyes narrowed when he saw Xiaoji's face, causing his past memories to flood back, and he wondered if the old friend had changed into a rival. Tiaoji went into a sudden panic because Yun had somehow learned Yun's secret nickname for him without asking. Yun had a big surprise because he learned that his great-grandfather was actually very famous. As the first light of day fell over the battlefield, he realized that a sudden, overwhelming sorrow had taken over his entire world, leaving him wondering why everyone who loved him was gone. Tiaoji looked down as the boy tried to ask more questions before he could finish them, saying quietly that talking about Xiao Binbin wasn't necessary then either. Yin looked puzzled because the feeling of being mocked had never been so unbearable. Yin was quietly hiding his real power behind Zhao's silence for so long, wondering exactly where he got the idea to stay silent. Yuna felt a sudden surge of anger as she realized that returning to school would mean missing out on an important event. So instead, she clenched her fists tight until they were shaking with pure fury. It felt like a solid conversation, yet beneath the warmth, a cool instinct whispered, "If anyone else digs too hard, I just get caught and look foolish." Yuna wandered through a quiet hallway when she noticed old notes pinned up on the wall that said, "After my passing, these records will never be forgotten." She looked around in confusion before realizing it was just a mistake. Next thing they saw was a new train cutting through the station right before they could say goodbye. Oh no! The class went wild with excitement as the bell rang and everyone jumped up and down in a row of seats. It was a strange time when everything seemed different from before. Long after 1,000 years passed, nature had changed into something entirely different and terrifyingly beautiful. He didn't believe at all when people said they were using dungeon items for carriage rides, because so many new sights and smells had suddenly come alive right there. He had once imagined seeing something in the dark dungeon before, but this time he really did see it all along. The door creaked open as he stepped in, wondering if the treasures inside were actually earned through battles rather than just random loot from monsters. He strapped on that shiny, gold-colored chimera bone ring made from the chest ribs of the flesh-and-bone dungeon lord, which let him easily bind his arm into this giant beast's hand. He grabbed the tough-looking physical skill book from his bag because it felt so good to have one in your hand, even though most people only find these in dungeon chests or sell them for a few coins out of nowhere when they're not trying to fight monsters. His strong body skills were active and passive, permanently reducing how much physical damage he took from attacks. The loot from that final battle vanished before anyone could even find it in the inventory. His eyes flashed like a sudden flash of light in the dark, and for a moment, he didn't even realize that something terrible had just happened after his final breath. It took him no time to arrive at that solemn modern history memorial hall when his eyes immediately landed on a colossal statue representing Louis, the supreme ruler of the kingdom and the emperor who had finally ended those disastrous dungeon disasters. He walked into the hall and started sharing stories with the class, reminding them about how much this place has changed since those early days when it was where that major rebellion fought. He told the class that back before time started to roll, the students had been haunted by many dark dungeons, and now even after that terrifying journey where they encountered a monster called S-Rank, they were still constantly scared of them. King Louis personally led a massive professional army, and despite suffering horrific injuries along the way, he eventually took down this horrifying dungeon with all his might. It happened just then, when the plan went wrong, his boss, Yun, stepped in to stop the chaos. The king loved Yun so much he kept him under his watch as a loyal servant. Yet beneath that deep trust lay a heart that never truly returned gratitude to anyone. Yuna felt a sudden wave of anger because she realized just how far they had gone, from clearing an easy S-rank dungeon to getting caught in ambush. The teacher slammed his hand down as he spoke, showing how much heart had been broken by the betrayal they faced so hard to survive. Their leader tore his heart off and stood up in the middle of the battlefield, fighting fiercely for all those who were hurt by his past mistakes. With Dingen's mighty power at his side, the rebel uprising finally crumbled under him. Ding Kuan's mysterious name suddenly sent Yuna's curious eyes blazing brighter than the sun. He turned his head and whispered, "Did they even make up such a name?" The bullies who had tortured Yun in the lake suddenly looked at each other with wide eyes as their bodies seemed to vanish, making them wonder how it was all possible given that they were still alive. A loud bully shouted that his old boss's dungeon was finally empty, and instantly, he wondered how fast such a clean job could happen without anyone helping him get back in. He believed it was a miracle that their luck landed them with Master Ding Shu. Realizing then that they were the very people responsible for torturing the man who had taken in their bodies, the group rushed over him to hear what he said. Ding Shu stood there, holding Zai Wankin's shoulder in front of him as the crowd erupted into total disbelief because he had survived a disaster inside the dungeon itself. He whispered, admitting he'd nearly pulled the party down there today and demanded to see how they'd handle the money owed. Chao's panic made it crystal clear that Ding Shu didn't have the fault for what happened to him. His face burned with anger as he threatened to make sure the man who nearly killed both of them got caught for killing each other. Ding Shu shook Chao's head so hard the man looked confused and didn't even know what was happening in his head. A frightened boy, Ding Shu, turned sharply toward the statue before the crowd as he watched his father's ancient body crushed beneath the weight of a mighty hero. He whispered to Xiao Ji, revealing that himself was actually a treacherous traitor born in their family. He looked around nervously and whispered, "Did anyone actually believe in my choice?" Ding Shu was so angry that he shouted, telling Xiao that the former master might hurt his great-grandfather. But nothing happened as a result of the conversation. He gathered everyone together because he knew his grandfather Dingun had been a great hero. When I heard his voice grow loud and angry, my own eyes shot up and shimmered with such fierce fury that I couldn't help but look at him directly. The group noticed they were all wrong. The kid beside them wasn't named Xiao Ji at all. He was actually a direct relative of their own family. To outsiders, seeing the dead cousin of a villain insulted by a hero felt like life was in reverse. They remembered their own ancestors killing everyone, and now they wonder just how many others would die without him save them. Ding Shu started with a sigh and realized he wasn't supposed to talk about himself, while the old man spoke loudly in front of everyone. The teacher stepped forward and gently touched Zhao's shoulder before speaking. "I'm glad we can talk again, because I know how much you value honesty. And remember, even though we're adults now, your character has always been a hero to me." Even though he felt nothing about his own feelings toward the man, he still couldn't let someone else call him a liar because of what they said. She paused on her page and then turned away as if she knew exactly what to do next. Ding Shu took off his cap and stood up to show the crowd how terrible they were when someone beat them publicly. Yet everyone cheered for him because no one dared hurt him. Nobody would have helped the vicious dog that had been beaten, and Xiao Ji was a very despised dog. He grabbed Kaijaja's hair and shouted, "Did you believe I, the heir to a hero's legacy, could possibly make that mistake?" Someone kicked him right as he was about to strike Zaire, and now he's lying on the floor. Zai's wide eyes told the world that something startling had happened. Yin blinked in shock at his own words and stared blankly at the hero's family, wondering why they would let those little kids ignore him entirely. The kids didn't know Yin was a special guy before the class started recording. They were shocked when they heard he looked completely different, and how dare he hit Ding Shu. They assumed he was crazy because he only knew about level 5, being the weakest in their grade, so it made sense that he would have lost his mind. Ding Shu sighed and scrubbed his face clean so the punch in his face wouldn't hurt Yin anymore, even though Yin had been trying hard to ignore the man who was just a punching bag. He and his friends sprinted after their son as they chased down the path. Yin was so fast he looked like a moving storm, weaving through the enemy's strikes to hit them hard and before they even got a chance. Ding Shu tumbled down onto the dirt and began hurling a torrent of red blood at anyone standing nearby. The class quietly murmured as the bell rang. Ding Shu felt utterly stunned by the speed of Yun's arrival. The students were baffled because they didn't know what had happened after Ding Shu was taken down so quickly. When Ding Shu questioned how such a trash-tier level 5 support could suddenly become stronger than him, he simply exploded with rage. Immediately, he unleashed the skill Hell, which increased his attack power by 25%. The master wielded a fiery forge hammer that gave him an incredible 314-point attack. Thinking Yun was having a sudden turn of events and took a wild leap to strike the man down. The boy sprinted forward as he seized a free swing, unleashing a powerful strike that doubled his own offensive strength thanks to the magic blade. The Ding Shu hit the floor with a heavy crash from his father's sudden attack. Suddenly, the guard stepped forward to see Yun as he landed, but instead of offering help, he immediately asked if anyone could act as a healer for him. The shocked students saw that Yun had already been running at a record pace for only level 5. The blonde girl and her best friend looked completely stunned as they heard the news. A guard told everyone that fighting was banned at the school because it could damage things, so when he questioned why the teacher shouldn't be controlling their behavior, they just smiled. The teacher began a long walk toward Yun, and he had already insulted a hero before even going down that path for his son. According to the man, Yin acted without scruples while the teacher's sword gleamed over his own face as he lost focus completely. Our boy grabbed the ring before the teacher could strike back, sending the sword flying into the air and shattering all around him. Yuna gently stopped them by pointing out that while Dingshu told a different story, the boy was actually trying to curry favor with his family. The teacher ordered him to quiet down, then fixed his gaze on the ring as he wondered if it was even worth fighting something so weak when he could have shown his full strength. Yin stepped forward as if to prove himself, but his true power lay in what he said. He wasn't afraid to challenge the teacher about their own kind. The students were stunned by Yun's unbelievable ability to stop the teacher's assault, so the teacher assured them they'd fully dig into why things went wrong. Internally, he was asking himself whether Yun had even taken a single piece of gear and if there was any kind of support behind that plan. The ring Yun wore looked like the Chimera Bone ring, but had already cracked by 3 sevens, even though its original quality was legendary and it came from an elite level 21 lord. So trying to use it against a level 35 teacher felt like pushing something that already failed. Yuna stepped forward to announce her expulsion, which was part of a larger punishment plan that included Xiaoji. Xiaoji strolled over, his eyes wide as he watched the boys run toward him to see what the teacher had done. They weren't surprised at all because they knew Yun could stop that teacher from attacking them. The teacher asked his students to cast a healing spell on Dingshu. So we all went back into the hallway together as soon as they got out. Binbin looked devastated because the final battle ended with him alone, having vanished long before anyone else ever saw the face of his hero. He stared intently at the sea creature and wondered what he'd say if he asked him something right this second, knowing his mind was already ready to speak for him. He gasped and said, "My knowledge of history isn't up to par." So he ordered Dinkuin to tell him exactly what that great man's deeds looked like. Chowie trembled while whispering, unsure if his memory held even a fraction of the truth. Yet he knew the big enemy, Yun, had already plotted their plan against him long ago. The narrator paused to recount a daring plan he'd built up in secret before a dangerous dungeon fight, offering his help to save the rebellion from chaos. Yuni's heart sank when he remembered that exact moment of ambush in his past life, causing him to feel a sudden wave of surprise at the chaos. Ding Kun, who had been practicing intensely since childhood, decided to step up and solve the dungeon crisis instead of letting time pass. He rose to the throne after a long battle against his enemies and spent decades fighting his way through every corner of the land, where he stood up in time to stop terrible disasters from happening everywhere. Yuna stared down at the earth, thinking about how his own life ended when he was merely one small piece in the mountain of dead people's final resting place. Yun stared with a sad face at the statue holding a sword, asking how much the hero was worth to him. Tiaoji told the tale that this flowing cloud sword wasn't just any blade. It was the one the hero wielded when he slew the villainous Yun. It stood out as an incredibly powerful weapon right from the start. When Yuna's eyes shone bright with fury, she didn't just steal his glory or wins. She took the very blade out of him herself before even deciding to take Dingun. In the shadow of the Ding family compound, Hailu warriors were patrolling as they watched everything go by. The lights in a room flickered and then turned to soft, warm gold, signaling that one of them had finally found the key to what they were looking for. He spotted Yun and Xiao slipping down an alley nearby. He didn't really care if anyone noticed them, because they looked like they were just walking by. The man wasn't looking for any hints. Instead, his sharp eyes darted around as Yun scanned the room to see if anyone was hiding behind him. He told Zioi he had to go because there are too many guards, so no matter how clever Dingshu sneaks around, he's going back for them when they get back from hiding. Even though Ding Kun wanted to shoot the hero right from his hands, he realized he couldn't do it. When Xiao Ji told me about Ding Kun, he said that the legendary warrior had never left any of that world's dungeons, spending every single day there and nowhere else. It feels like you're stuck inside a sealed dungeon while the rest of your group rushes past the military guards with only one special pass open. And yet, Dingun's family has to be prepared for exactly what happens when that door finally opens again. The little boy asked, "Do we really need those extra guards? We're just one of the many branches that started all along with Dingun." Zioi was so proud to show everyone that he truly belonged to the greatest heroes in history, and that his entire castle was filled with ancient dungeons waiting for adventurers. The boy looked surprised as he discovered his own little dungeon was right here at home. A rare beast from a private dungeon was once bought and sold by Xiao Jai, yet no ordinary person with little power or influence dared to imagine such an adventure. Ding Shu carried his guards at every turn because it allowed him to farm monsters and climb levels without fail, while ordinary students were stuck inside the school's dungeons only when forced to battle over the monsters themselves. Yuna pondered how much the world had changed, wondering if it would mean those who became richer or more powerful would grow even higher. Tiaoji nodded, pointing out that a normal person typically reaches the next tier between levels 15 and 20. Now, many don't access dungeons after they do, so they stay stuck at these lower numbers. You can imagine reaching a level near 30 if you happen to work in the dark world of dungeons and become either a miner or a ranger there. Contrastingly, guards at Ding Shu's house might turn into monsters by using the dungeon they've already been trapped in as a base for leveling up to 30 levels. To climb to a new level of power, most people didn't just join a guild or attend school. They had to first get recruited by the army or pass rigorous school exams before even entering the world's highest dungeons. The little boy realized hard when he heard the rule. Unless he could beat someone else in a fight, his heart couldn't be strong enough to save anyone else's life. Chao said, "You better just get out there. He thinks we're so weak compared to them that even if I'm super smart, I'll still lose." Yuno knew he couldn't fight the hero himself, much less the powerful supreme King Louis, even with all his extra power. Despite knowing his tiny scouting skills only work for small areas up to level 30, he didn't think these would be enough to keep the entire mansion secure around the clock. And so, besides, that was really not a life or death fight because most of the guards were actually quite relaxed. He felt he had already gotten too far into the game and panicked because his only choice now was to stay back. Yuna felt her heart race as she leaped onto the wall, imagining how far off the beaten path his past life had been, a world of perfect scouting and flawless escapes, whereas here, in those dangerous Hailu dungeons, everything was just plain chaotic. Chaoji cut through the air instantly to stop the fall, telling Yuna that even if they managed to squeeze inside a private dungeon this way, they could still get killed without any consequences. Our boy snatched Xiao from the floor with a grin and shouted, "Let's fix this life." Chao Jai said yes, but he didn't want to go into the guild until he got his own gear ready before even meeting anyone. Yun asked with a spark of hope, "Do you truly believe a guild can help me change my fate?" Kaijaja, the legendary grandson of the traitor Chao Nun, replied earnestly. The soft tears welled up in Kaijaja's sad eyes as time seemed to stop for a moment of deep sorrow. The boy leaned over the wall to pull his friend back, clearly realizing that fate isn't written like a game of what if, but rather set to change moments as they happen right now. Yuna didn't want to miss out on that dangerous spot ahead, so he carefully waited for Yuna's choice before stepping forward. Xiaoju started sweating quietly, while our boy stared wide-eyed at him, asking himself whether that heir would ever do the exact same thing their great-uncle had once done. As the door swung open, Xiao stepped forward and held a glass of water, knowing that he was going to have to drink something more than blood before anyone saw him die. Yun gently lowered his voice so Yun could hear the quiet, "Don't make any noise, because you're the only one who knows what's actually on." As long as Xiongzina held her breath, stepped back from the shadows, and spotted a perfect window, she would be able to slip right into it. Yuna pulled Xiao Ji along with her, then ran straight toward the open door of the Ding family compound, ready to grab his arm before he could stop them. The ground beneath Tiaoji seemed to growl and shift as he stared intently at the ancient dungeon stretching deep underground. They stepped into the dark dungeon and watched two terrible foes, one a 6-level monster and another an 8-level one. While our boy noticed that the higher level had only slightly more monsters than before, which he guessed was likely because Ding Shu's family kept killing them often. Our little boy told us there were only 2 small mobs, and he was sure to get the job done. Zaioi felt a wave of fear and immediately said he couldn't even try to beat them. Kai Oja was terrified because her son had just fought the monster alone, yet she couldn't trust that boy enough to let him go without defending herself first. He suddenly realized that now was the perfect time to walk back into the house and let everyone know his heart had finally stopped racing. Tiaoji wondered why Yun hadn't even tried fighting back when the other boy needed help finding a way to strike back himself. Yuna stepped forward to assure him that everything was safe so she wouldn't be the one who got hurt. Xiao trusted him so fully that he used his shield to attack. Then the monster turned around and looked back at him before the attacker could hit him again. Tiaoji really had that great skill. He started shaking because he was too afraid to fight back, which made his brain think he was trapped inside an unsafe zone, even though he never hurt anyone. Little Xiao fought hard against a giant beast and finally let out a loud scream as his armor crumbled completely under the impact. Suddenly, a mighty thunderclap shook down and swept away all the scary beasts in Yun's path. Xiaoju looked a bit bewildered after leveling up to his 7th rank. Our boy explained that experience is earned by balancing out monsters with your contribution. He wouldn't get much more if he left them alone until someone else killed them instead, and Yuna wielded the crescentful bone blade, a piece of condensed resentment from a leg bone, which boosted his attack power by 62 and his spiritual attack by 11. Yuna watched Zaioi dance so smoothly and wondered why the extra points were split out of nowhere. Tiaoji explained that it was just a matter of adding them equally every time. He remembered he wasn't supposed to get extra points for using Shield Bear. Chowder joked about how it was hard to get in at school if he didn't have his fast shield bearers. Everyone was already chasing monsters before he even got there. Yuna gave her breath away and told him clearly that she had grown up needing more time to think about the future than to worry about today's troubles. When he explained how to get those high-level boosts, he pointed out that the Bastion Fortress needed 60 stamina and 90 defense points instead of adding random numbers. Chao kept wondering if he should try to reach level 60, thinking maybe it was just a little bit more than what an ordinary person had ever hit. Our little boy grabbed his shoulder and smiled so loudly that even the tall people in the back heard him telling everyone, "I can now think of anything big." So he had to figure out how to get ahead in his own classroom next. He pondered how his support team had finally come alive after hiding a secret trick from everyone, wondering if something wild could turn him into a new class entirely if nothing else went wrong. He fell into a stunned silence as his eyes widened at the terrifying truth. He might be able to level his mirror's skill higher. In the Ding family's dark dungeon, Yin struck down zombies with incredible speed before his very own trick blade magic even took effect on him. The beast, once more breathing a single last breath, let out a roar that shook the floor so loud it sounded like thunder, proving just how much power he had, but also how tired his soul was for an endless fight. Yin drained all of his mana and stamina in seconds, leaving him weakly dead to confirm that his body simply couldn't hold up even one more punch. Yin cheered as the battle won massive prizes, jumping up to level 17 with his health, mana, and attribute points all booming in a fast pace. He grabbed 2 soul-like shadows from the elite zombies and got both of them for free. The war ended, so Yin gathered everything he could find, those cool items that made the levels feel much better and gave him a new view of his own mirrored world. Suddenly, he felt a chill and rushed up the stairs to see if his team was still on guard. Chao Ji, at level 8 with fresh gear, hesitated as he saw the danger rise again. He counted the creatures and checked his alarm, realizing that fighting them would be far more dangerous than staying in hiding. Yuna agreed, knowing fighting right now was a nightmare that needed constant protection and careful tricks from her side. Yuna stared at the shiny new skill book as magic bricks appeared to form. When he flipped the mirror to reverse his skill, it didn't just make things invisible. It turned everyday items into an abstract, void-like force that made fighting impossible in some ways and subtly changed how people handled their lives without causing harm or combat. The old girl frowned at her reflection and wondered how much harder she had to work until her skills finally grew strong enough to take a third step forward in the game. He stood on the edge of a jagged cliff and stared at the sky above, watching the magic reverse itself with such force that his heart beat faster, making him feel like an unstoppable warrior, just as the power deepened inside him. Yin blinked and smiled brightly as he turned his attention toward the stars in a new way. The old dungeon let visitors see a mirror world where their own monsters were living, offering a truly unique and immersive experience. The boss wasn't scary, but he was so cool that killing him would make you think twice before you even ran into him. They moved quietly through the dark cave, staying hidden behind rocks while guards checked them constantly, so they were always safe from danger. Yuna watched as the massive, shadowy boss stepped out from behind the glowing purple chain guard that stood atop the staircase, surrounded by many loyal defenders who kept him safe. Tiaoji froze in horror as they spotted the dungeon boss lurking from behind, and Yin didn't even blink. He just noted that his own school guard was already keeping a close eye on the enemy, proving that being part of a strong group really does make you safe. Yuna stared at the scene as several relaxed guards stood guard on the stairs, watching the glowing purple chains bind the boss. Realizing they were powerful restraints that could stop the boss entirely, she quietly analyzed how many people would be watching her if a direct assault came, knowing it would draw all of them to the fight before she could even make contact. The old guard walked away by himself because he didn't know how to stop the boss from killing him, yet Yuna noticed a chance for action. Cho-Woi stared as he pulled a single blade out of the air, unleashing a power that boosted his attack by 150%, and then charged in to cover up, making it look like he had taken down the whole guard at once while hiding behind the impact. He stared at Yun, his eyes wide as he waited for the man next to him to start speaking about something important. The terrified guard looked down at the door with wide eyes and whispered, "I beg you, I'm begging. Tell me what's on this list so I can know if he's dead or alive." He looked at Yun with a smile that promised a great adventure. Yun's question made the guard flinch, but he immediately corrected himself with a quick, confident smile. "No, I don't think anyone is that rare." The guard looked puzzled when Yun walked into the room, thinking he had misunderstood Yin was actually a heroic grandfather fanboy. The guard backed away in terror as his own words made him feel even more guilty when he saw the old master leave. He warned that the passes were just temporary samples without any real insiders to protect them. Yino didn't even flinch as he stiffened the guard's neck. He quietly told him, "Don't worry about it. before issuing a cold command that ordered him to dump all his stuff into the bag, which was clearly in order to steal from Yuno and take his identity. At the Ding family compound, Yin stood up and looked down at the guard holding onto his shirt with frustration. It turned out to be a mediocre skill book that Yin couldn't afford anymore, and when the terrified guard shouted that he only had what the Ding family kept in their inner residence, leaving the outer guards to get scraps, it felt like a moment of absolute despair. Yuna discovered the sun's warmth as a spell, turning her body into a shield to let healers in while staying safe from harm. He used his mirror world to turn that dangerous offense back into a gentle moonlight blessing, a powerful move that gives him temporary attacks while he heals up. He thought of it exactly like how the dungeon pass feels so safe inside his own home. The guard pointed sharply at the sprawling inner palace, telling his fellow officers that only a direct call from outside could let them step inside without a problem. It came as a shock that the whole crew had more than enough power to beat every outside guard. Even Ding Shu looked like he was already ready to take charge. Yuna pulled her guard tighter and shouted, "Did you see where that person came from?" The scared man nodded slowly while whispering, "Yes, she's a powerful family head of level 42 who was right there. We're talking about current and second family heads at rank 422, the third family head being a beast of 52, and the old master standing tall at 57. Yin stepped in to stop the fight, knowing a second wave of superpowers wouldn't make things easy. Yin knew that Keijiri would still be wearing the guard's armor, so he waited patiently until his master finally sent a signal. Now, it was his turn to play the part, ready to coax him back toward the safe place before anything else happened. In the dark dungeons of Yun's world, he watched the powerful boss guarding itself with heavy steel chains that kept him safe forever, realizing now that such secure protection was vulnerable to a simple trap. A massive mistake had been made when guards dismissed this as harmless because they believed no one could possibly open the heavy chains. They were unaware that Yun, the one with a past life of secrets, had been able to open the doors for them. He slowly walked in front of the guard and effortlessly unlocked the door by hand alone. As the collapsing walls tore open and the furious boss unleashed a roar, panic erupted through the halls while the massive creature lurched across the room. The family chief was caught off guard by this sudden surge of chaos, needing an easy way out before the fight truly began. The plan worked. As the alarm shrieked, while the level 42 family head sprinted from a locked door to grab dungeon reinforcements, Yin grabbed those high-level combat chains bound by the boss using the chaos as his distraction. Holding that pulsing gear, he knew his move succeeded. With a heavy guard and elite unit busy, they could easily slip inside the inner residence. As the plan for Yin opened its way, new guests arrived at the main entrance of the Ding family home, greeted by servants who welcomed Second Master Ding Hao level 42 and his son, Ding Shu, as they drove into a fancy car. Ding Hao brushed off Ding Shu's recent loss to Yin as a minor error, but Ding Shu shot back that greeting wasn't why he was there. Ding Hao pulled out the car door and let Miss Yin Sha walk in. As two young women stepped out into the cold air, they were met by a shy friend who wore long blonde hair and was dressed in black. It was a big moment for the mustache family when they finally made it out of that dungeon nightmare and walked up to the top of the stairs to see what happened next. Then suddenly, his face turned into a cloud of confusion before fading back into rage. He swung a rough but firm elbow at the door, telling the passenger not to hold his breath while he left. The servant lay motionless on the floor while the angry family leader sprinted frantically toward Dinga, Ding Shu, and their two eager guests, leaving everyone visibly stunned by his sudden departure. Xiao Ji, dressed up like a guard, stood outside watching a strange event unfold at the house. Yin jumped right behind him and startled the boy as he was caught off guard. Yin asked Xiao Ji why he sounded so anxious while the Ding family was returning home, leading him to question his own sudden appearance at the door. The boss she released into the dark rooms felt like a dangerous nightmare, even though the dungeon lord is still a formidable foe and could easily chip away at her level 31 defenses. He was so sure they couldn't beat the boss any faster now that he asked Xiao Ji if he had ever seen anything strange. Xiao Shi stood alone by the door, watching as chaos slowly crept back into the quiet home. He told the family head that the servant he had kicked was actually his own youngest uncle, Chowie, who turned out to be only 17 years old and held a very high rank. Yin listened quietly to Chao's story about how he and the old boy fought for freedom, realizing then that their bloodlines were tied together by such a terrible secret. Xiaoji said it so. Xiaoji saved them from years of shame and pain that followed for the children of traitors like his own family. Hearing about how much pain Yun's old friend's family had suffered because of lies, Yun's face showed grim sadness and strong will. The trees stood tall as they watched Xiao speak of how he had been branded a traitor by his own people. The Chao family had endured long years of cruelty from the great empire, so much that every home was torn apart and their very lives turned into ashes. Ding Kuan pulled strings to hide his true moves as he ensured that only the very few Chao survivors could live, leaving every other member crushed by relentless attacks under secret orders. The Chao family got beaten up without a better option to fight back, so they had to take over jobs done by those who tried to destroy their lives and end their days in silence. They now live in a terrible, silent existence where everyone stares at their boss like he's crazy, bowing and scraping money while Chaoji admits, with shame, that they're sometimes shown off as proof of the Ding family's power to forgive bad children. His dad was trying to stop his family from changing everything, even though they kept fighting to keep their luck together. The struggle ended in disaster for the boy and a breakdown at home, yet his loyal uncle, Zoli, turned into a silent, obedient servant to everything. Xiao Jiao felt completely weighed down by that terrible past and started doubting whether he had truly followed Yun into the worst of it. Yun froze as his own doubt hit a wall when he realized Yun had made a bold choice by turning toward him, forcing him to accept the truth that he must head straight for the inner residence. Chao panicked and grabbed the man before the explosion could happen, shouting urgently to warn Yun that the terrified Ding Shu's father, a fully armed 420 fighter, was right there in the air. You thought he might be scared when you heard about the threat? No. Yun didn't panic because he believed that in a world where strong men decide what happens next, people shouldn't try to force their lives into danger just by being brave. Yuna looked at Xiao Ji and said, "You can do whatever you want if you stay calm," then handed him a clear choice. Even though Yun held firm on his own, Xiao remained terrified and unsure. He claimed that the Ding family was an enormous force so powerful that it had to be fought, leaving him with no way to resist. Yuno stepped back from him, staring at the distant home as he began walking toward Xiao Ji, telling her his true aim wasn't just stopping one family. It was dismantling the entire empire itself. In that quiet little room, where the walls felt too soft to touch and the air smelled faintly of old paper, Ding Hao sat comfortably in his own bed, looking around with a strange sense of wonder as he discovered the ancient dungeon lord had somehow escaped the heavy iron cages they held. Seeing his friend, the cheerful brunette asked her grandmother about whether everyone else had been in trouble before, hoping to get back on their feet today while they were still in a hospital. Ding Hao waved goodbye as he told his older brother, who had been waiting all day for him, that the hard work of fixing the dungeon problems wouldn't matter when their family finally arrived for the guest. They didn't stop listening as he spoke. Instead, their attention turned toward a new arrival who had just arrived at the mansion, where he was told by his powerful father, the old master, and his third brother they were already heading home to find her. He also told her they'd already talked to Hero Grandpa, and she felt so thrilled to see him, making sure everything got handled pretty easily. On a remote balcony, Yin listened intently, his eyes locked on the figure of Grandpa Hero, who was clearly carrying an important message for what he knew must be a significant leader named Ding Kuan. He thought his brain was a tangled knot of old knowledge and the sudden news about the guard. So now he needed not just a ticket, but also someone ready to lead him through this dangerous door. She stared at Yin Sha with such deep admiration that she suddenly knew he held a position of supreme importance. The word important suddenly struck Yin Sha like a heavy stone in his chest, reminding him of the name he had shared with himself all along, the exact same surname that defined their whole lives. He stared at it with a mix of curiosity and disbelief, wondering if such a trivial coincidence held more weight than anything else in this life. He pushed aside the worry and turned his eyes toward the door, ready to focus on securing his entrance into the dungeon. As the scene unfolded, Yin Sha quietly waited, her face held in an unspoken expression that seemed to hold secrets only for those who knew what was beneath the surface. The Ding family's main fighters were all too busy, so Yin took a calculated risk by sneaking quietly into their inner residence while moving silently through the grand halls, slipping past two maids who were talking and hiding in the shadows behind him. He slipped through the grand, jewel-encrusted corridors of a towering mansion, diving ever deep into the secret chambers that led to where his heart truly belonged. Outside the dark dungeon door, a bright light finally came into view as the mystery was finally cleared up. Ding stood tall in front of the defeated dungeon lord and looked around at the chaos, wondering if anyone had actually let them loose or if they were just out of breath from running after all that damage. He wasn't sure who was responsible, but he knew taking a huge risk wouldn't have been just for one piece of gear like those chains. He felt a fierce determination in his heart and immediately told his guard to jump on the inner house before anyone else could get there. His biggest worry wasn't about scary things. Instead, he worried about letting his important guest get scared away from her. Yin wandered into the quiet room, starting his mission when he found a pile of empty drawers behind the desk that the guard had warned him about. He remembered his secret power of phasing, which flipped the direction of every stone move, letting him slip past the thick desk to see where the real danger lay behind it. A huge pile of books and journal rolls stood waiting in his dusty bookcase as he picked up his favorite stories from the top shelf. She turned her gaze from the pile of papers toward an old book that felt strangely familiar, as if the pages held secrets she hadn't seen before. He set the heavy bookshelf aside to reveal his true treasure, a bundle of premium skill guides packed with powerful abilities that can instantly neutralize every enemy within a vast circle. He quickly checked out the collection, knowing he'd finally found the family's secret stash. The door to Ding's private home burst open, but instead of guests, a wall of armored soldiers stood guard over every entryway. Tiaoji slipped into the nearby woods with a heart pounding in terror, clutching his bag tight and wondering why so many guards had suddenly turned up, fearing they might be found. His panic only grew as more troops arrived at once, and he realized the situation was far too dangerous to miss. He worried hard that if he didn't get out immediately, he would have to hide forever. He found the terrifying possibility of being caught so painful that he remembered his father getting crazy and his whole family enduring endless suffering. Immediately, his mind raced with a simple desire: to slip away, to hide, and try to escape. The next guard stood right in front of his hiding point and froze because he didn't know what to do. At that pivotal split second, Yin thought, I could try to help him, but I must decide on my own first. Having decided on his move, Chaoji roared loudly and threw himself into the air to draw the guard's focus for his next move. Then he broke out his hiding spot and sprinted away, creating an immediate escape so he could finally leave Yin behind. Yin stepped into the grand hall and watched Xiaoi cheerfully smash through the heavy doors, letting her bravery shine out from the shadows. With the guards distracted, he smashed through the glass and jumped out into the cold night. He immediately felt a surge of pride as he realized that his friend had finally stepped over the line between cowardice and courage and took on the challenge against himself. Chaori knew he needed help so fast that Yuna instantly set up a bigger trap for him. She jumped between the guards like a stormy sea, shouting that she had taken the chains and skill books in the name of revenge, causing them to panic and flee immediately. As Yuna ran, she unleashed her stolen slowing aura, but reversed instantly into an accelerating one that sped everyone up, including Ding Yi. Seeing the family flee in panic instead of running home, he ordered his squads to stop chasing and go back to save the dungeon lord from the real danger. Xiaoi looked completely bewildered as he watched Yuni lead every single person toward that dangerous turnback. Yuni smiled as he saw how many guards were now waiting to catch away the remaining forces before they could defeat the wild dungeon lord. The boss stood before them and wanted to blow them all out of the water, but their power was so low that this battle wasn't worth fighting anymore. Yun checked the status of his ultimate skill Mirror World, seeing how close it was to getting stronger. With his eyes glowing purple, he knew what he had to do. Killing the weakened dungeon lord now would give him the final push he needed to make his most powerful ability stronger. The absolute silence of the Ding family's luxurious living room seemed suddenly heavy and oppressive as the mood shifted from casual to serious. The blonde girl smiled warmly at Ding Hao as she gently lifted the cup of tea and said, "Please, your host can handle that outside noise." Dinga stepped forward and laughed with confidence, telling his guest Ding that he had already taken care of any trouble while he was away so he could focus on his duties. It wasn't easy. In the dungeon, Grand Patriarch Ding barked at a guard who was sluggish and ordered him to chase the overlord straight into the fray. Seeing Yun zip by, Ding shouted orders for his elite troops to jump into action immediately, ready to chase away any threat while he ran toward it. Yun sprinted away, chasing their failed plan and leaving the team behind completely alone. He realized he was ahead of the game by putting all his attributes toward agility instead of strength. He combined incredible speed with a mind as sharp as a razor blade to make special level 30 knights and archers feel like they were just too weak for his power. The heavy oak door creaked open as the skeleton overlord stepped out from behind, his armor splintering under the sudden impact of the beast's massive hammer, leaving him utterly exposed in front of thousands of screaming guards trying to block their way back inside. Yin watched as the plan turned into a perfect storm, and suddenly the boss had collapsed under its own power with a flash of purple magic, ready to unleash a final, crushing blow on that weak dungeon lord. Yin rushed closer when his guards noticed he was there. A deafening alarm shattered the silence as the team scrambled desperately to block the attacker's path. Before they could even organize a defense, Yin unleashed a torrent of chaotic thorns that erupted from the ground, lashing out violently at them all with a fury that left everyone bewildered by the sheer power and speed of his move. The thorns tried to burn the guard, Yet Yun's magic was too powerful for them to stop, causing many defenders to be scorched on their way home. A terrifying outcome followed when the guards lost their minds, and one rogue mage hurled a devastating spell against them, sending their entire army tumbling in chaos. The other guards stood frozen in terror, their breath hitching as they saw a skill so perfectly calculated that it felt like magic was happening right in front of them. Yin grabbed the opportunity when his foes were all over them. The chaos of the guard didn't stop him. Instead, he slipped through like smoke from a clear tunnel toward his target, who sat ready and eager to be taken by the low-level enemy. The soldiers' walls collapsed with a bang as Yin slipped past like smoke, and panic erupted from the shouting around them about how their shields and crowd control had been completely useless. Yin watched his crew members move clumsily and realized they weren't ready for the real fight. He knew they were just waiting to get lost. He chuckled as he reflected on how the long essay softened everyone, which in turn caused a big fall for them all. The guard captain stared at his men, whispering a desperate plea. "If we can catch him before he escapes, I'll get my own death." Just as the first patriarch dinged, he stepped forward with an army ready to fight. He ordered his soldiers to stand their ground and stop Yin from moving. A 22-year-old soldier wearing hot armor shouted that he would tackle the thief himself. With his blazing sword, he leaped and prepared to unleash a mighty assault on the enemy. He stood in his chair and waited for the man to come closer, his eyes scanning every movement of the powerful figure who was walking toward him. He let out a sharp cry of annoyance as his friend tried to dodge the coming blows. He grabbed his stash of level 60 combat chains from the floor and looked down at them with a mix of awe and excitement. Even though his strength was a bit low level, he still felt completely secure because his heavy armor kept the enemy away. Dingy unleashed his flames and met them with a defensive wall of steel, completely stalling the explosion before he could reach it. He turned the boss's fire into a weapon instead of stopping it with blocks, kicking forward and smashing the barrier that kept the enemy away. He landed perfectly in front of the cursed dungeon boss. He waved his hand with a grin, while the angry father gave him a genuine nod of thanks after getting off the bus. When the guards didn't stop him, Yin told him to grab the overlord and take his experience away before anyone could see him. You heard that right. He punched the beast with such force it broke its bones, and suddenly the monster vanished in a puff of air while he just leveled up fast. Most importantly, that dungeon boss had pushed his ultimate power to its absolute limit by mastering a hidden ability called Mirror World. You can see now that your system notification has officially confirmed the upgrade, bringing you one step closer to hitting that coveted level 2. Ding, he howled in pure rage as he chased Yun away because his prize kill had been taken, swinging his blazing axe straight at the fallen warrior. The guard leader led others toward the door as he saw a man standing still in front of the giant corpse, determined to get away. He stood tall and didn't flinch when the wind blew across the field. He stared at his chest plate, making sure to focus hard on the gold coins that were already piled up there. He finally unlocked his final superpower after hitting the hardest level 2. Dingy's mighty blast seemed to hit a ghostly echo of Yun instead, but the shadowless figure didn't even blink. Instead, it simply turned into nothing at the last second. They froze in shock when he vanished without a word. He stepped out of a familiar city and landed on a crystal blue-green world where silence was everywhere, only to activate his secret mirror ability instantly. He walked into that strange dimension where ghosts looked like clear versions of him and their guards, unaware that time was running slow as a timer said his walk would end in nearly 30 minutes. Excited for this moment, he realized instantly that now he could step right inside the mirror world itself. Inside that mysterious blue-green realm, Yin began to tap into his new power and realized every shadow was a perfect mirror image of reality, flipped from left to right. He wondered if it was just a trick on his hand when he finally saw the ghostly forms. But as his hand brushed against that crystalline floor, he discovered it wasn't merely a trick. It felt truly real and solid beneath his touch. Yin jumped in awe as his discovery revealed that the missing mirror shard was actually an important piece of solid crystal, much more valuable than any other item he found at all times. He felt a sudden spark of magic when he realized he could finally take things from the dream world and put them back in reality. He paused, swirling thought about that new skill thing in his head, and carefully pulled up a fresh list to see if something else was actually different from before. He looked at the wall of hidden powers, things invisible or pushing things back, but he didn't know any of those tricks were ready to use. The quick note told the team those advanced tricks weren't ready yet to start with. The moment he grasped the magic's true strength, a long list appeared showing every skill he had learned in reverse order. Now, he realized that using those powerful tools meant finding them back in a real world where they were ordinary, just like his friends. He used that one simple trick at first level to turn into a real powerhouse, So when he saw the list of future powers, it all changed. Now, every power was just another pair he could pick and plan his entire class path ahead of time. Yin stared at the empty spot where his hands should be, and then realized something was right in front of him. He turned slowly and froze as a tiny, ghostly blue-green figure floated helplessly through the crystal air, wondering if it was just a dream or if it truly possessed its own soul, something that felt almost too real for his tired body. He was fascinated by the thought that another soul might exist here, so he asked out loud if such a possibility was even true. Without a crack of surprise, he saw the calm soul turn green and scream before vanishing into a beast-like bone, as if it had been carved out from solid stone by pure power. Yin gasped as he stepped forward with the bright glow of his sword, eyes wide in a moment of pure surprise before diving into action. He swung hard at the creature with one powerful strike, effortlessly smashing the undead down and noting it wasn't exactly strong just then. As soon as he caught up to it, a fresh message flashed on the screen. Here's an undead contract. The system told him he could trade his soul for something else, letting the defeated being escape into the mirror world so they could fight together in reality. This deal included keeping his highest level of power and giving him 20 more opportunities to turn souls into new masters. Yin stared at the sky as an invisible hand pulled him toward a strange, glowing object, making him wonder if that new power would truly change everything or just take him somewhere he didn't want to go. He realized now that after defeating a ghostly monster in his reflection, he could trade its spirit for power and take it back as a living fighter. Holding that shard from the mirror world, he knew this wasn't just for small items. It was a massive upgrade to bring undead armies into reality alongside everything else. Looking at the endless crystal landscape of possibilities, he found the idea fascinating. Back in the real world, things were messy. With its lord defeated, the private dungeon had vanished, leaving a stunned and confused army of guards. They couldn't understand where the intruder had gone. One captain frantically asked how he just vanished, wondering if it was a high-level rogue stealth skill. The rogue expert told him gently that his secret was only for themselves, knowing he couldn't hide anyone away forever. The captain felt furious after no answers were given, so he snatched up the rogue and demanded to know how a thief could manage so many of them alone. That anger only grew as Ding Yi, the first patriarch who had lost his private dungeon, became even more enraged. He grabbed one of his men by the face and yelled, "If they couldn't find the person responsible, we'd have to pay him back." Yuna knew his mirror walk timer had hit 0, and now he finally asked himself, should I return home just like before, or did the rules change somewhere else in the new world? A split second passed until he saw him standing right behind his own reflection, exactly where he had disappeared earlier. The angry Ding Yi saw him instantly and screamed at his men to grab him before he could escape. Yin stood his ground against the Ding family's storming troops and held out a hand, letting a swirling green light blaze brightly behind it as he told them not to rush ahead while they were still being cornered. And then he reached for that power, and a wave of terrifying skeletons poured in, turning the stunned guards into an undead army eager to catch him. They screamed for air at the sight of those strange beings, who looked so real that everyone assumed they were just ghosts. Ding Yi stepped forward to stop the rising fear among his men. He yelled them away from panic and told them the strange things they saw earlier were nothing more than an old, familiar monster. One guard saw a skeletal warrior standing ready for battle, but when he looked up, he noticed a health bar floating above the creature. It turned out to be an undead skeleton with just 200 points of life left, the exact same number as Yun. Even though the fear was so strong that it almost knocked him over, he couldn't help but look at the number. Dingy's anger spiked as his men held their breath for a second before suddenly charging in, promising that anyone who attacks the intruders will earn extra points by getting the villain caught. It felt like a golden ticket that made the boys suddenly think they were ready for adventure instead of fear. As the guards shifted focus away from the undead army back at Yin, it suddenly seemed that the man who had been hiding wasn't really there all along. Yin had been using a freshly raised undead as a cover while watching the battle unfold from afar, realizing that his forces were simply too small to really matter. He knew that finding and making deals with stronger souls would be enough to defeat all those disorganized guards. But he was stuck because the many powerful souls around him were all gone. He just closed up some big deals for their followers before they left the tiny piece of reality where his eyes grew dim. He found out his journey through mirrors never ends. He stumbled into a wall so close he was trapped at 200 meters, which forced him to look for new undead just after he left that spot forevermore. His plan fell apart when he noticed Xiao Ji, who was pretending to be an obstacle, actually slipped into the forest. The guard didn't smile. Instead, he looked out his window with a sneer that made the boy jump, calling out in a low voice, "Oh, you've been hiding until now." Yun jumped out of the darkness with a confident air, moving fast enough to hit the guards exactly where they were before he could reach him. He didn't wait for a second and sprinted toward the exit, pulling Xiao Ji close as the crowd began to turn. Yun stared at the chaos and a mess, watching his undead army keep the rest of the guards busy as they tried to find their way home. He knew it was time to go back, escape the danger, and check every new thing he'd built up from that bold raid before moving on. Yin and Xiaoi pulled back behind cover as the rest of the Ding Guard soldiers charged forward to stop the undead army. The guard charged at the skeletal warriors and shattered their bones with fierce force. The guard leader pointed out the beasts were weak, yet they quickly fell into a state of stunned relief that lasted only a moment before vanishing completely. To their horror, a defeated skeleton instantly reformed and held on for the life of another skeleton, so they kept fighting only to see them resurrect forever. Just as the guard spirits started to break apart, Ding Gei, the strong third head of the Ding family, walked in with calm confidence, smoking his cup and realizing that summoning skeletons was actually a way to bring back his master. He smiled, thinking they only needed to kill these monsters until their power ran out. Sometime after the chaos broke, the powerful master, his long white beard sweeping across the room, stepped forward and demanded to see who had left. Ding Hao stepped inside, bowing deeply as he apologized for making his wife's favorite place unsafe. He told them that the intruder was so bold he had broken windows, sparking a chaotic fight that drove everyone away from her. The Grandmaster, a towering figure known as Level 57 Ding Dan from Hero Ding Kuan, stormed out of the room with fury, yelling after his son because someone had breached the security line and vanished without a trace. The sudden silence broke for a moment as Dingo felt the weight of his confession settle over him, and then he realized he was truly the one who had caused all this trouble. Ding Hao sent a positive message while chaos raged in the city, and even though Miss Yin Sha went into the dangerous dungeon with her grandfather, Hero Dingen's story remained untold. Ding Di scowled at the angry patriarch and vowed to make sure the guilty ones got away with nothing no matter how much they hurt their family. He kicked off with a scowl and shouted, "Quick, get the kid checking for anything else he stole." Yin kept his eyes fixed on that stolen permit bearing the name of a very important character while trying to escape the panic of the room full of noise and danger. The hero was holding onto a tight pass and needed an escort because he couldn't fight alone in that dangerous dungeon. The raid at the Ding's home brought in extra money for the family, which raised his level up to 20. His powerful Chimera Bone ring had been nearly crushed by a blow during an attack, yet he managed to steal more than 10 valuable skill books. One of those treasures included chants that were all of the support type. You heard that catchy battle song? It didn't only boost your chances of hitting hard, it also knocked down your guard, though you liked the result. He looked at his own reversed word first before thinking of a shield song that did the opposite. He learned to reverse the bad habits of fighting too hard and got really excited when those tips finally helped him crush tough battles just by using their boosted power. The dungeon lord handed him 2 treasures, a cheat book and corrupted knight armor. The guy finally jumped through the ceiling after climbing every single step down to get ready for the big jump. Yinny pondered his newfound powers and honestly admitted that his summoning of necromantic attacks had more than doubled his actual strength, even though he knew the damage was not quite enough to win. When the hero Dinkoin looked over his enemy's statue, he knew instantly that the Berserker was at least S rank, which meant Yin needed to be level 50 or higher and had to locate and summon a true S rank necromantic spirit before killing him. Later, safe from the Ding compound, a still shaken Xiao Ji nervously asked Yin if they would not follow him. Yin sighed, realizing they had lost all pursuers and were now safe, even though it left Xiao Ji feeling deeply uneasy as he watched the fading remnants of their undead forces. Xiao Ji stared at a list of dangerous places near him, wondering if any haunted halls might contain an old hero who had finally fallen. Yin stepped in front of him and said, "You need to go deep into the dungeons to grow stronger," while adding that they would figure out what that powerful person was for later on. It took a moment before Chao finally spotted the hidden spot he had been waiting for. He paused, his heart pounding with worry, realizing that the secret entrance to the school's private dungeon could never be entered without a sneaker or a key. Yun stood frozen as the door slammed shut behind him, clutching his chest like a shield against the darkness of that sealed, guarded dungeon, knowing that only with special tools and careful planning could he finally breach it. Yin got into school's private dungeon with special methods while stealing a valuable purple skill book from his wanderer class, but the bribe worked. The teacher now believed Yin had strong backing and became much more helpful, even though they could rarely change things about the dungeons. He told them that the door wasn't locked even though the dungeon was still open for those graduating today. Even though Yin didn't fit the usual mold, his promising teacher gave him a chance and pledged to help him succeed. Yun stepped into a group of brave students as they raced toward the school's deadly dungeon, ready to face every threat together in its fierce maze. The other kids looked either determined or flattered one grimly, wondering if he had finally earned that last chance to level up before disappearing, while another just thanked the hero as Yun passed by the glowing portal. He felt a strange unease, sensing something was wrong with this dungeon. The teacher gave a warm, enthusiastic talk to show us exactly where that brave hero had stood and how much of his magic might still be right there nearby. Far away in the forest near a crumbling temple, Chao stared at a skeleton that looked like a ghost, realizing with horror that the story of the brave man Dinkuan had been written by the wicked Empire's lie, when it turned out Dinkuan was actually a traitor who killed his grandfather. Chao paused mid-speech, his heart pounding as he thought over whether to reveal that terrifying secret to Yun. The students crowded onto the dungeon steps, where the teacher gave them a stern warning about the dangerous level ahead. Then, as he pointed at a red-haired student wearing heavy armor named Little Z, the leader told him to watch over Yun and Chaoji carefully before they could get lost in their own little world. Little Z was genuinely frustrated because he had to babysit while trying to level up his character. The other student shoved him back while he groaned about why kids should be allowed in there, and then Z walked into the dungeons alone. Yin kept his hand firmly on Yun's shoulder as he led Xiao Ji through the grand purple room, warning the others that no one would be left behind unless someone tried to add a burden to their load. His instincts told him the place should be level 2040, yet a terrifying sense of dread washed over him. It was exactly what haunted his past life. Students zoomed deeper into a sparkling purple dungeon where Yun Yin and her best friend Yun Sha stood out from their classmates. Yin puzzled over why such young kids could even live there. Little Z was handed a mission to bring Yun out of hiding, but he couldn't help it. He too spotted the girls running toward that armored student, who had finally caught up to his patrol. She felt a sudden rush to take in every pretty girl coming by, and was so excited she jumped up when the first one showed up. The dreamer fell asleep as his fantasy suddenly ended when a taller, serious kid in a helmet slammed him into a wall, yelling him to stop dreaming so it wouldn't happen again. The guy told Yun Yin and Yun Sha they were much stronger than level 30. Scolding them for asking the girls for help while he knew that daydreaming was just bad luck. Embarrassed, the kid muttered that he was actually just talking about his dreams when everything else went wrong. The older students were chatting while a daydreamer quietly watched Yun Sha and Yun Yin. They didn't care about them because the two top-level juniors walked straight at Yun and Xiao Ju. Yuna watched them come closer with a confused face, and suddenly her eyes widened at that familiar name, Yun Sha. She knew instantly he was the high-status guest from the Ding family's house, but her direct approach made him suspicious before she even got to his room. Yin Sha smiled up at him with a grin that felt like sunshine on a rainy day. She didn't hide her excitement. She just told him she found him standing there at the memorial hall and praised how strong he really is, though she added it because his voice sounded so special to her own ears. Yin didn't know if she wanted to talk or be annoying, but then suddenly her eyes turned gold and she leaned closer, revealing she knew exactly who the intruder was right before he screamed out. Yin Sha suddenly stepped into the room and wore a sleek, white mage outfit, ready for battle. Yin Yin stepped into the darkness and turned down her green cloak, while Yin Sha chuckled and laughed at all three of them before leading away from the cave entrance. When they started walking away, Yin thought deeply about what had just happened, knowing that someone might recognize him and choose to keep his secret safe rather than tell anyone else. That moment made him pause and ask himself whether she was trying to warn him or simply being careful not to draw too much attention. Ding Shu seemed to remember how the man from years ago even knew what he was saying back then. However, Yin decided not to worry for now. He was confident that as long as the Ding family didn't act immediately, his fast leveling speed would soon make him strong enough.